Story 1. The Closet Door. I grew up in a quiet, suburban neighborhood in New Jersey. The kind of place where people left their doors unlocked during the day. Kids played outside until dark, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what everyone thought. One night, when I was around 17, I learned how false that sense of safety really was. It was a Saturday night in December. My parents had gone out to dinner, and I was home alone. I remember sitting in the living room, watching TV with the lights dimmed and a blanket wrapped around me. Taya, the house was silent, except for the faint hum of the television. At some point, I heard a noise. It was faint, almost like a tapping sound coming from upstairs. I muted the TV and sat there, straining my ears. At first, I thought it might just be the house settling. But then it came again, this time louder, distinct creak, like footsteps. My heart sank. Nobody else was supposed to be home. I got up slowly, every part of me tense, and grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapony, heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Tiptoed up the stairs, trying not to make a sound. The hallway was dark, and I could feel my chest tightening with every step I took. That's when I heard it again. Floorboard groaning under weight, coming from my parents' bedroom. I froze. For a second, I thought about just running out of the house, but something in me needed to know if I was imagining things. I crept closer, clutching the flashlight. My parents' door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges squeaking just enough to make me wince. The room was dark, but I could make out the outlines of furniture. Everything looked normal at first. Was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when I noticed something. Closet door. It was shut. My parents never shut that door. It was always slightly open. Always. I stood there, frozen, staring at the closet like it was staring back at me. I don't know how long I stood there before I heard it. The softest sound. A breath. Someone was in the closet. Terry instinct screamed at me to run, and that's exactly what I did. I bolted down the stairs, out the front door, and straight to my neighbor's house. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely ring their doorbell. When my neighbor answered, I told him someone was in my house. He grabbed a baseball bat and told me to stay put, while he went back with me to check. We walked back inside together, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. When we got upstairs and into my parents' room, the closet door was wide open. The closet was empty, but the window in the bedroom was also open, the curtain blowing in the cold winter air. The police later told us they believed someone had broken in through the back door while I was downstairs. They must have hidden in the closet when they realized I was still home. The worst part, on the floor of the closet, they found something that still chills me to this day. A kitchen knife from our own set downstairs. Whoever it was hadn't come in to steal. They had taken a weapon. And they were hiding just a few feet from where I stood, waiting for the right moment. To this day, I can't stand closed closet doors, And every time I hear a creak in the night, I remember the sound of that quiet breath in the dark. Story 2. The back door. This happened a few years ago when I was living with my wife in a small one-story house outside of Dallas, Texas. The neighborhood wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly great either. We were careful, always locked the doors, kept the porch light on at night, and tried not to draw attention to ourselves. One summer night, I woke up around 2 a.m. because I thought I heard something outside. At first, it sounded like the wind, just faint rustling near the back of the house. But then I heard it again, a rattle. It came from the back door. I sat up in bed, straining my ears. My wife was still asleep beside me, breathing steadily, but I was wide awake now. The sound came again, this time clearer. Someone was trying to handle. I froze. For a few seconds, I hoped it was just my imagination. Maybe the air conditioner kicking on, or the wood shifting in the humidity. But then I heard it again. The metallic click of the back door handle turning. Slowly, someone was outside, testing it. I shook my wife awake and whispered, "Stay quiet. Someone's at the door." Her eyes went wide instantly. She grabbed her phone and started dialing 911 while I crept to the kitchen to grab the baseball bat we kept near the fridge. As I reached the hallway, I heard a soft knock on the back door. Just 2 little taps, almost polite. I held my breath, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles hurt. Then came a whisper, muffled, low, but definitely a voice. "Open up." I can't even explain the chill that went through me. Whoever was outside wasn't yelling, wasn't trying to break the glass. They were just whispering, like they already belonged inside. I leaned close to the hallway window that looked out toward the back porch. In the faint glow of the motion light, I saw him, a tall man, standing perfectly still at the back door, his head tilted like he was listening. His clothes were dark, and his face was in shadow, but I could see his hand resting on the doorknob. The way he stood there wasn't normal. He wasn't shifting around, or pacing, or even trying to hide. He just stood there, waiting. My wife whispered from behind me that the police were on their way, and as if he heard her, the man suddenly stepped closer to the glass of the back door. For the first time, I saw his face. He was smiling, not a friendly smile, a wide, unblinking grin that made my stomach turn. He just stood there, pressing his face against the glass, smiling at us through the window. I raised the bat, even though I knew there was a locked door between us. The man didn't move. He didn't knock again. He just kept smiling. Then, without warning, the motion light clicked off. The porch went dark, and when it came back on a few seconds later, he was gone. We didn't hear him leave. We didn't see him run. He had just vanished. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty. They checked the area, but found nothing, no footprints, no forced entry, nothing disturbed. But here's the part that really unsettled me. The back door lock. When the officers inspected it, they told us it had been tampered with. Someone had been working on it with tools, trying to force it open. If we hadn't woken up when we did, if my wife hadn't called the police right away, there was no telling how close he was to actually getting inside. And I'll never forget that smile, like he knew something we didn't. Story 3. The attic. When I was 19, I moved into a rental house with 2 friends. It was an older 2-story place with a lot of character creaky floors, narrow staircases, and a draft that seemed to follow you around no matter what room you were in. We liked it though. Rent was cheap, and it gave us freedom away from our parents. The house had one part we didn't use, the attic. The landlord warned us it wasn't insulated and wasn't really livable. The hatch to it was in the upstairs hallway ceiling with one of those pull-down ladders. None of us had ever gone up there. One night in late spring, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of movement. At first, I thought it was one of my roommates going to the bathroom. But then I realized the sound wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from above me. The ceiling creaked slowly and unevenly, like someone crawling across the attic floorboards. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The sound paused, then continued, again deliberate, careful movements. I grabbed my phone and texted my roommate across the hall. "You up? Do you hear that?" "Him? Yeah, thought it was you." We both stepped into the hallway at the same time, looking up at the ceiling. The noise stopped. Then, out of nowhere, came a soft thud directly above us. My other roommate woke up from the noise and joined us in the hall. We all stood there, staring at the attic hatch, our stomachs sinking with the same realization. Someone was up there. We debated calling the cops right then, but curiosity got the better of us. My roommate, James, grabbed a broomstick and poked at the hatch. It didn't budge. For a minute, the silence was so heavy that we almost convinced ourselves we'd imagined it. Then, just as James started to lower the broom, the hatch moved. Not much, just a slight shift. Okay, like someone on the other side had touched it. That was enough. We bolted downstairs and called the police. Okay. When the officers arrived, they asked us to wait outside while they investigated. Okay. We stood in the driveway, watching the faint glow of their flashlights through the upstairs windows. After about 20 minutes, they came back down, looking grim. They told us the attic wasn't empty. In the far corner, hidden under a pile of old insulation and boards, they found a sleeping bag. Next to it was a backpack filled with clothes, half-eaten food, and chillingly several of our belongings. Phone chargers, a hoodie, even a set of my roommate's keys. Whoever had been living up there had been sneaking into our rooms at night while we were asleep, taking things little by little. But here's the worst part. The officers found fresh footprints in the dust leading from the sleeping bag to the attic hatch. They said it looked like whoever had been staying up there had left just minutes before they arrived. He was in the attic with us when we first heard the noises. And he had slipped out silently, somehow, before the police ever found him. We never figured out how long he'd been living above us, or how he even got into the house in the first place. But every time I hear a creak above me in a house now, my first thought isn't pipes or settling wood. Is that someone might still be up there, watching, waiting. Story 4. The bedroom door. When I was 19, I was still living with my parents in a small, one-story house in Oregon. The house wasn't huge, just 3 bedrooms connected by a single hallway, but I had grown up there, and it always felt safe. Safe in the way only a family home can feel. But after one night in particular, I never looked at that house the same way again. It was a Friday in late autumn. My parents had decided to drive out of town for the weekend to visit my aunt, leaving me home alone for 2 nights. I wasn't nervous about it. I was used to staying by myself. I'd lock the doors, maybe order some food, and binge watch videos until I fell asleep. That evening was quiet. It's too quiet, actually. The neighborhood had settled into that stillness you only get in the suburbs after dark, where even the dogs stop barking and the only sound is the wind pushing through the trees. I remember locking the front and back doors, checking the windows, and then retreating to my bedroom with my laptop. By around midnight, I had turned off the lights and was lying in bed, half dozing, while some video played quietly in the background. The soft glow of the screen was the only light in the room. That's when I woke up. Not fully at first, just that half-awake state where you're aware something feels wrong. My room was dark. The laptop long since shut itself off, but there was a sound pulling me out of sleep. A sound I knew wasn't part of the normal house noises. The creak of the front door. I froze. I thought maybe I had imagined it. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of it shutting again. Soft, controlled. Somebody was inside. For a few moments, I lay perfectly still, staring into the dark. My ears strained for any sound, and then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the living room floor. Not quick, not casual, slow, careful, like they were trying not to be heard. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands already shaking. But I couldn't bring myself to dial right away. Some part of me thought maybe it was my parents coming home early. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I heard the footsteps turn into the hallway. The floorboards creaked in that familiar rhythm I'd walked across 1,000 times, but this time the sound filled me with dread. Whoever it was, they were heading toward the bedrooms. My bedroom. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I clutched my phone tight, staring at the faint glow of light under the crack of the door. I could see the shadow of feet, wide feet, and then the doorknob began to turn. Very slowly. I could hear the faint scrape of the metal, the quiet rattle as it twisted against the lock. I held my breath so hard, my chest hurt. The knob jiggled once, then again, but the lock held. Silence followed. Long, unbearable silence. The shadow remained under the door, unmoving. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. They were listening. I swear I could hear breathing, low, steady, right on the other side of that thin door. I sat there, frozen for what felt like forever, clutching the phone in one hand and the only thing I had on my nightstand to use as a weaponing, heavy glass of water in the other. Finally, after what had to be several minutes, the shadow shifted. The footsteps creaked again, moving slowly back down the hallway. I waited, heart pounding, until I heard the faint sound of the front door opening again, then closing. I sat there for a long time before I finally had the courage to move. My fingers were trembling as I dialed 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until the police arrived. When the officers came in, they checked the whole house. Nothing. No sign of forced entry at the front door. No sign of anyone inside. But then, one of the officers pointed something out that made my stomach drop. On the living room floor, leading into the hallway, were muddy footprints. Barefoot, large, human footprints. They trailed right up to my bedroom door and then back out the way they came. That alone was terrifying enough. But what the officers found outside was worse. In the dirt around the house, especially near the windows, there were more barefoot prints, dozens of them, circling the house, back and forth. The officer told me it looked like someone had been walking around the property for a long time before finally deciding to come inside. When my parents got home, they had new locks installed immediately. But no matter how secure the house was, I never slept peacefully there again, because the image that haunted me wasn't just a footprint, or the knob turning, or even the breathing I swore I heard. It was the thought of that stranger, standing silently in the hallway, separated from me by only a thin wooden door, listening, waiting, and knowing he was patient enough to. Circled the house for hours before finally stepping inside.